Good morning. Xavier Becerra, Chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, joined by our Vice Chairman Joe Crowley of New York, our colleague Congresswoman Donna Edwards of Maryland, who happens to be the the chair of the Democratic Women's Working Group, and also joined by Melissa Boteach, got it right, who is the Director of Poverty and Policy at the Center for American Progress. We had a caucus meeting where we discussed any number of things, including the impending omnibus bill that we will see on the House floor this week. We talked about the continued need to push and fight for extension of unemployment insurance for Americans who are out of work through no fault of their own. We concentrated the bulk of our time, though, to discuss something that we believe in the Democratic Caucus is indispensable for success of America and the return to an economy that's creating jobs for everyone, and that is making sure that women succeed in America. Because as we like to say in the Democratic Caucus, when women succeed, America succeeds. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that from some of our speakers who are with us today. I simply want to add a couple of things. It's all about security, and I think Melissa will testify to that in her comments, that what she and the folks at CAP, working with Maria Shriver and the folks who helped put together the Shriver report that talks about America and women and what we see, what you'll hear is that it's all about security. Forgetting those days of insecurity, whether it's economic insecurity or health insecurity or insecurity in the safety for your family at home. It's about having security so that you can feel confident about testing out the waters for that new job, or letting your child go off to school on her own, or making sure that you can take your ill son to the doctor. Security. And we know that these days it's been tough for America, but there are some good signs. 9 million Americans today can count on health security as a result of the Affordable Care Act and the work that it's done to help them either gain new insurance or keep their insurance. But it's not enough. We know we still have to do more for the millions of Americans who aren't totally aware of the new rights that they have under the new health security law. We know that there have been over 8 million jobs created in the past 4 years or so. That's great news. But we also know that every 8 seconds, another American is losing access to unemployment insurance benefits because this Congress has been unable to extend those emergency benefits to those Americans the way we've done in the past for decades. And we know that if we work very hard, we can build an economy that works for everyone. And so that's why we're here talking about those things that are important for us to move forward. And we were very pleased to have a report on the work that's been done by Melissa and her colleagues to make it clear to Americans what we need to do. And so with that, let me now turn to our Vice Chairman, who will talk a little bit more about these issues. But we understand that women succeed, America succeeds. Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Javier. Joe Crowley of New York. President Kennedy was fond of saying, never send a boy in to do a man's job, send a lady. I think if we modernize that, we might say today, never send a boy in to do a man's job, send a woman. But I think the message is clear. And I think it's wonderful that his niece, Maria Shriver, working on the legacy of her own father and Sergeant Shriver in the war on poverty, and working in conjunction with our friends at CAP, Center for American Progress, that this report has been issued. I'd like to say we're excited about this report, but at the same time, the report itself is somewhat depressing and reminds us of how far we've come, but also how much further we have to go in terms of bringing about equality for women in our country, women who are not just subservient, women who are not just in the home, but women who are actually, in many cases, the sole breadwinner for a family, and how difficult it is for them today in meeting the obligations that they have for themselves and for their families. And what we as a Congress can do to make those changes, what we as a country can do, not as Democrats, not as Republicans, but as Americans, to help lift up the lives of women in our country, and in doing so, help provide for a better life for their children and for their families. They are caregivers. They are providing for their children, and at the same time, they're trying to build themselves and bring themselves out of poverty, and in doing so, helping the economy of our country. That's what we ought to be about here. So I welcome this report, and I vow to work alongside my colleagues in the House to see that we make changes in our country, not only on behalf of women, but on behalf of all American families. And someone who has been working tirelessly on this issue is our great colleague from the state of Maryland, Donna Edwards. She's one of the leaders of the cause of women's rights here in the House of Representatives and on economic justice for women in our country. Donna?
Thank you. Thank you to the chairman and the vice chairman, and to be here today. I spent the weekend really absorbing the Shriver report. I read through the stories, I read through the facts, and in so many ways, I frankly felt like I was reading about my own life earlier in my life. And what it says to me is that of the 100 million people who live on the brink of poverty, to know that 70% of them are women, as detailed in this report from the Center for American Progress and from the Shriver report. It really begs the question of why it is that we are not doing what we need to do to improve the economic lives and status of women and children and families in this country. And I know that among Democrats, we have promoted the agenda for a women's economic agenda that really does hinge on this question of what we do with women who are living on the brink of poverty. When women succeed, as our chair has said, America succeeds. And this report really spells out in great detail the data that underpins a policy vision that really is meant to improve the lives and economic status of women. Just 48 hours before the Shriver report was released, some of my colleagues, Republican colleagues here in the Congress, a number of them took to the floor of the House, disparaging women who are single women who are heading households, who are raising children, disparaging the unemployed, so many of whom are women. And yet this data shows us that, in fact, women get up, many women get up every single day, they go to work, and they're just not making enough. They need a floor that really meets their needs to get out of poverty, and that means increasing the minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $10.10 an hour. It means expanding opportunities for women to succeed in the economy through education. It also means the basic things like child care, because if a woman and if a family knows that their child is being cared for in a quality, accessible, affordable child care environment, it actually makes them more productive, more efficient at work. And it eliminates the stress that families feel. And so it's really unfortunate that here in the Congress, many of my Republican colleagues have chosen to focus on eliminating health care access for women and disparaging their economic circumstances instead of focusing on the things that really will make a difference in the lives of so many women. And you know what? As Democrats in our women's economic agenda, we also know that we have an agenda that will work for American women, and the legislation is there. I've introduced the Child Care Act to expand child care tax credits and opportunities for women. Pay equity. If a woman is only earning less than a man, that means that a family and a woman living on her own is deprived of 1/3 of their income. That is the difference for some women between living in poverty and not living high on the hog, but just getting by and meeting their everyday needs and responsibilities. And then again, as I've said, increasing the minimum wage. So many women in this country are looking to us here in the Congress to speak to them. And as Democrats, we're committed to doing that. And what the Shriver report does is it lays a factual and statistical foundation to the things that we know will improve the lives and status of women. And so I'm really grateful that the Center for American Progress and the Shriver Report have partnered to bring these stories to the American people, the stories of the 100 million people in this country, women and children, who are living and families living on the brink of poverty. And with that, I'd like to introduce from the Center for American Progress, Melissa Boteach, and thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to Representatives Becerra, Crowley, and Edwards. So as Representative Edwards said, in this country, over 100 million people are living in poverty or on its brink, and over 70% of those people are women and the children who depend on them. And this core fact has consequences not only for women and their families, it has consequences for our overall economy. Today, 2/3 of families rely on mothers as breadwinners. But if we were to cut the gender wage gap, right now women are earning on average 77 cents to the average man, with even worse disparities for African American women and Latinas. If we were to close that gender wage gap, we would cut poverty for working women and their families in half and add $500 billion to our economy. And so at its core, the Shriver Report, which is a collaboration between Maria Shriver and the Center for American Progress, is about how we got here, why it matters, and how we push back from the economic brink. And to that end, the book details government solutions, business solutions, and solutions to help women themselves push back. As the representatives noted, the government solutions are very much focused on helping to women balance the reality of breadwinning and caregiving in their lives. The United States is the only developed nation with no paid family leave, no paid sick days. 2/3 of minimum wage workers are women, even though they're about half the workforce. That means that a woman who has a single mother with 2 kids who's working full-time year-round, is not even above the poverty line. We talk about the need for universal pre-K and comprehensive childcare, again, to help families balance breadwinning and caregiving, when women in poverty are spending about 40% of their income on childcare in some cases. We also talk about what the private sector can do. So the book releases for the first time a Thrive Index that provides a set of questions that employers can ask themselves about how they can provide better opportunities for their low-wage employers. There's one section on pay benefits, but most of the things require no additional cost, but simply making reforms to modernize this nation's relationship with women and the reality of their lives. There's also personal solutions. We debut the skeleton of a new curriculum called Life Ed, which is a modern version of home ec that provides girls with the financial education that they need in order to make the right decisions moving forward. The book also provides a massive 3,500 sample poll that shows that the public is with us on these issues. You have 96% of women on the brink saying the single most important policy for them would be paid sick days. We're talking about 70% of low-wage workers who do not have a single paid sick days, forcing them to choose between staying home with a sick child or paying for this month's groceries. People widely support the minimum wage, childcare. We have people talking about the need to adapt to the reality of single parents in today's economy. So the book provides solutions. It provides the evidence that there's public support for those solutions, and then it's providing the rollout and the political and public will building to help us get where we need to go. We're going to be releasing an HBO documentary Maria Shriver is co-producing with HBO on March 17th called Paycheck to Paycheck, The Life and Times of Katrina Gilbert, which profiles a day in the life of one of these women on the brink. There's a photojournalism exhibit, which shows, again, a day in the life of a woman on the brink, beautiful, original, award-winning photographer photos that are really showing a face and a voice to the women that we're talking about in this report. There are women on the brink throughout the report speaking in their own words about what these policies would mean to them and the reality of their lives today. We know that we can push back from the economic brink. This book provides a blueprint, it provides why it matters, and it calls us all to action with 10 things that we can do to help us get there. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So to Melissa, thank you very much for being with us, but more importantly for the work that you've done. Here it is, the report. And I think the bottom line here is that it's pretty clear. It's about rewarding work, about making it worthwhile for people to go out there and seek that livelihood and feel like they've been rewarded for working hard for America. And when, as Melissa says, 2/3 of those who are receiving the minimum wage are women, or when women are still receiving only 77 cents on the dollar compared to a man, we're not rewarding work. When you don't have any sick leave, we're not rewarding work. And this is all about making sure that there is security in America for all. And especially if you work and work very hard, there is no reason why you should not feel secure in the greatest land on earth. And so with that, we will take any questions you might have. Frank?
Speaker Boehner just asked about the West Virginia chemical spill, that I'm entirely confident that there are ample regulations already in the books in relation to where chemicals are housed in that regard. Do you think that that's true, or do you think that the government needs to revisit regulations in regards to chemicals so that something like this doesn't happen again?
And I'd like to make sure we stick to the issues that we're discussing, but this also deals with security. When you can't feel comfortable at your home drinking the water that comes out of your faucet, and you're not sure if the local and state governments or the national government are going to be there to make sure that your water is not polluted, that your children are about to drink, there are issues. There are important, paramount security issues that have to be addressed. Were there enough regulations in place? Was there enough oversight to make sure that this wouldn't happen? We're going to find out a little bit more. But certainly I hope the Speaker is not saying that we should loosen the oversight, the watchdogging that has to occur to make sure that the water that we pay for, because we all pay taxes for access to clean drinking water, that's not something that the Speaker would take for granted. We need to go out there and make sure that we have in place through our government, at every different level of government, the things it takes to provide us the security that we're entitled to because we pay our taxes for that. Ginger, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, you mentioned that the omnibus came up in the meeting this morning. Get a sense of the general mood and thoughts on that, and whether or not your members will be voting for it. I know, to sort of dovetail into the issue today, that there is funding for Head Start that wasn't there before. Is that enough? Are people excited about that kind of stuff, or was the stuff that was cut sort of counterweigh that?
I think excited is an overstatement. I don't think people are excited about this. I think what they do recognize it's a step forward and a moving forward. Member Lowy from New York laid out the details of what are in the bill. And I think that for the most part, it is a step forward. It's not the number that we had wanted, but the one we're forced to deal with, and it is an end to, or at least it's a mitigation of sequester for this year, and I think for that, many of us in the Democratic Caucus are grateful.
Donna, Ms. Edwards wanted to answer.
Let me just say this. I think that to her credit, Senator Mikulski on the Senate side and Ranking Member Lowy on the Democratic side over here have done yeoman's work in trying to fit within a budget. The fact is that even with this budget presentation, we haven't extended unemployment benefits for 1.3 million people in December, another 72,000 people every single week who've lost their unemployment benefits, their long-term unemployment benefits. Democrats are going to be required to provide a lot of votes in order to pass this appropriations package. Republicans need to extend unemployment benefits without conditions.
I just want to add to that because I think Donna has hit it right on the money. Many of us in December when we voted for this opportunity to have a year-long budget did so because we wanted to move this process along for the 3 months it would take to come up with this full omnibus, this full budget package. But we don't want to do it leaving Americans who've lost their jobs through no fault of their own behind. As I just mentioned, in the time that we've been speaking, I could see 100 Americans have lost their unemployment benefits. And so we don't intend to leave them behind. Many of us are still concerned that if this package does not include or give us a chance in the House of Representatives to have a vote on extending unemployment insurance for those Americans who are right now seeking work but can't find it and therefore are without job through no fault of their own, it's still a tough vote. This is a Republican proposed budget by Paul Ryan. Our Democrats, Nita Lowy, in the House, worked very hard to make it as good as we could, but please, no one should be deceived into believing that this is something we enjoy doing. And if we can't see our Republican colleagues give Americans a chance to have their unemployment insurance extended on an emergency basis, it may be a tough vote for a number of us.
Are you saying you want an amendment in order to this omnibus later this week of the Rules Committee on UI?
We want to vote. Just the way you see every week, Republicans have a way in the House of Representatives to put a bill on the floor that will repeal all or part of the new health security law that's helped 9 million Americans already. Somehow they can figure out a way to get a bill like that on the floor without ever having gone through committee, without ever having had conversation with Democrats. There's always a bill to do that. And if they can follow through on that obsession to eliminate that health security law to the point of spending taxpayer money to put a bill like that on the floor of the House, we believe that it shouldn't take that much effort to get a bill on the floor of the House that helps Americans who are out of work through no fault of their own so that they can continue getting their emergency unemployment insurance.
Let me follow just real quickly on that point, though. So you're asking for an amendment on the omnibus. Yet Harry Reid, with the exception of yesterday afternoon, had filled the amendment tree trying to block amendments on the UI bill there. I guess I'm hearing different things.
Chad, there are any number of ways to get a bill on the floor of the House that don't require only an amendment on the omnibus. As I just said, we had a bill this week that dealt with, once again, undoing part of the Affordable Care Act. We had one last week, I believe, at least one. And I guarantee you, when we come back again after this week, we'll have another bill on the floor of the House issued by our Republican colleagues that will have not gone through any vetting process through committees or anything else that would undermine health security for Americans. If we can do that, we should be able to get a bill on the floor that helps extend unemployment insurance for those over 1 million Americans and 1 every 8 seconds who is losing those desperately needed emergency unemployment insurance benefits. I don't know if anyone
I just want to add one point to that. The Americans who need unemployment insurance don't care about how we get it done. They just want us to do it. They want us to get it done. This is, again, we talked before about the issue of women. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. Unemployment insurance ought not to be a Democratic or Republican issue. It has taken on that face, but it ought not be the case. And what they're looking for is an agreement that, yes, we will extend unemployment insurance for those who desperately need it. People who are now making decisions. I've had email from a friend of mine who said he's just worked out a deal with his bank to hold on to his house for another 5 months. In the end, he has to make a balloon payment. He has to make decisions of whether he can put food on the table, his children and their school needs, et cetera, et cetera. The burdens of life, the normal average burdens of life that he and his wife are dealing with. Those are the people we're talking about. And this is a modicum of support. This is not the end all to their lives. This is just getting them through a rough patch. That's what we're talking about. So, it ought not be a question of whether we're putting on the back or tagging this onto the bill before us, and that would be acceptable to us. But if there were another vehicle by which we can get our Republican colleagues to agree to moving forward on the issue of UI, that's what we're asking. That's what we're demanding.
On the farm bill, sounds like the latest figure on SNAP cuts is $9 billion, which is much closer to your number than it is to the Republicans' $40 billion, but I think it's still going to be a tough vote for a lot of your members. What are you hearing from the caucus, and is that something that you could support?
Melissa just got up here and talked about the insecurity that families are facing. Women who are typically the principal caregiver for so many children in America likely are not going to be surprised to hear the news that there are some in Congress who want to cut nutrition from the programs that millions of families depend on. If our option is cutting $40 billion out of food nutrition for millions of families versus cutting $9 billion, well, it's clear which is a better option. I don't think Democrats believe that that's the only option we should have, though. And I don't think we're rewarding those who work if we tell them that simply because you don't make enough and you qualify for some nutrition programs for your kids, that we're going to deny you that. I have a very difficult time with any bill that tells me I should be happy that we're only cutting $9 billion out of food nutrition programs for some of the neediest families with children in America. So Nothing's done yet. And I hope that those conferees who are working on a farm bill understand that if you can figure out a way to give subsidies to people who live in cities to own agricultural lands and then be able to reap profits because the taxpayer is giving them some type of ag subsidy for living in New York while they're getting it for property in Montana, I got to ask why a child in America who right now depends on that breakfast at school should face the consequence of losing that breakfast if we're going to give subsidies to folks who don't even farm in an agricultural bill. So I didn't answer it directly, but I will tell you that I have a hard time believing that this is the course that America takes if we're going to try to reward those who work very hard.
Congressman, we saw the statements about bipartisanship on the omnibus, but were your colleagues chafing at how much you gave away? There are some proposed restrictions on the Affordable Care Act. Did you get the kind of deal you think you could have improved on?
Yeah, and I want to give Melissa a chance, if she wants to, along with my colleagues, comment on the last question about the Farm Bill and nutrition programs. But listen, many of us voted for the bill in December that gave us an opportunity to come up with this omnibus budget bill that moves us forward for beyond a year. This is not a world I hope we live in for very long. This is not the America I grew up knowing that what we do is we tell kids, whether it's through the nutrition programs, that they're not going to have a breakfast because we weren't willing to go after the subsidies we give to big oil to go drill for oil, or we're not going to stop the subsidies we give to wealthy Americans who purchase yachts and then get to write off the cost of the mortgage on or the lease on that yacht at the taxpayer's expense. Those aren't the kinds of things that make me believe that this is America that I grew up knowing. So there are some very tough items in that omnibus bill, and a lot of us are going to have to look very closely. And we're going to look even closer at it if it continues to exclude the over 1 million Americans who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own. And now, under this Congress, with some of our Republican colleagues, are on the verge of losing their emergency unemployment insurance because of the political actions here in Washington, D.C. But let me see if anyone wishes to comment.
I will just say very briefly on the farm bill that as Chairman Becerra has outlined, the nutrition cuts that are proposed are deeply concerning. They're not $40 billion; they're $9 billion instead. I'm going to look to some guidance from some of our conferees who are strong champions, particularly of our nutrition program. The chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Marcia Fudge, who also sits on the conference for guidance. But when you think about what's been outlined in the Shriver report and what people who are on the brink of poverty are experiencing, and that they dip in and out of poverty, and some of the ways that they are sustained is because of our nutrition programs, because they can go to a food pantry that may have some local support and some community support, but also has federal support. It's because their children can go to school and get free and reduced breakfast and lunch, and in many states, like in Maryland, supper as well, so that they don't go hungry from one day to the next when we expect them to learn. And so the idea that we have to operate in this limited environment where people who are in the most need are asked to suffer, while those who've gained the most in this economy are not, is a real challenge for me, both as a Democrat and as a woman and as a mother. And I think that we're going to be very concerned that the folks who need to be making sacrifices aren't doing that for the $9 billion that's really needed by families who live on the brink.
I just want to say these proposed cuts are coming on top of a cut that already took place across the board for all families on nutrition assistance on November 1st. And to pivot back to the book, one of the best ways if we want to reduce expenditures on the safety net is to enact the policies in this book. It's to raise the minimum wage. There was a recent study that showed that just in the fast food sector, workers who are working at or around the minimum wage are getting about $7 billion a year in the safety net. These are working families. If we were to raise the minimum wage, we could significantly reduce the amount that we're spending without cutting families off needed assistance. Paid family leave. The states that have enacted paid family leave, you've seen a reduction for families that were able to take advantage of it on relying on public public assistance. So the best way to really reduce public expenditures is not to cut people off needed assistance, it's to cut poverty. And the way that we cut poverty is through the blueprint that we've laid out in this book, through increasing wages, increasing job creation, and increasing family economic security.
One final question, perhaps? If not, thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I need me to